Everybody, just want to welcome you to this Open Digital Planning Show and Tell, the last one of 2024. So you're really welcome to join us for this next hour or so, and we've got a bit of an agenda to run through. We're going to do a little, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Newcastle's journey. For those of you who didn't manage to get to our, the away day that was in Newcastle in October. We've then handed over to the lovely Jess and Joe from PlanX, and subsequently over to Freya from who's representing the BOPS team. So we've got a little bit of a short agenda, really. If you've got any questions, please put them in the chat. Matt will keep an eye on them, and we'll try and answer them. And if we haven't, we'll do a sort of wash up at the end and go over anything that we've missed. But without further ado, we'll just quickly tell you a little bit about Newcastle and our little journey. So in terms of Newcastle and Open Digital Planning, just to say we've been around for a couple of years in terms of the open digital planning space. Some of the things that we've really done in terms of the product space are around PlanX services. So we had a number of issues in terms of blockers, which prevented us from going live with PlanX. They've been resolved by the OSL team, which has been really good. And but we've continued to actively influence and support developments and improvements in terms of PlanX around reporter breach or various services that they've developed. We recently went live with our validation check-in tool, which is a customer-facing tool. And we've also shared that to other PlanX councils so that they can use that and adopt it as they wish. As we've said, we've had input into the design and development of PlanX products, and we've also had quite a big focus on and been active in the metrics and evaluation space with John Drinkwater and other colleagues from the LPAs. And we're really, one of the things that we've learned is in terms of supporting other LPAs who use similar back office system to us. So we've actively promoted work with a user group of LPAs around the iDocs Cloud Tascomi system, and we're working closely with iDocs on this as well. Just to say that we've been involved pretty much as a full partner. We had this, it was an absolute pleasure to host in October, and it was great to just showcase the LPAs and the vendors from the ODP and the PropTech in a shared space. Really, it was an absolute privilege for us. We've started to shape that work in terms of the LPA service user group. So how do we reach benefits of ODP? And again, how do we deploy agile methodologies? We're dead keen to promote ODP opportunities and collegiate working, both within the region. Obviously, we work closely with our other ODP and PropTech partners like LPAs such as Gateshead. And when we aren't involved, we'll try and be a lifelong supporter and cheerleader to the ODP community. I guess one of the big things for us is, whilst we have only just gone live with PlanX, we have seen a lot of additional benefits of being in the ODP community. So it doesn't end with open digital planning. It's acted as a springboard for us, and it's helped accelerate our knowledge and capacity in lots of different fields around planning policy space and beyond. So again, just a couple of mentions there around Digital Site Healer, Virtual Newcastle Gateshead, PropTech, and we're so keen to develop our data and our evidence and support the common data standards. And obviously, we're going to mention our joint Newcastle Digital, hopefully local plan post 2025. Just some of the things we're involved in. We've done quite a lot of work in terms of our mapping facility, and there's a link there. We've done quite a bit of work in-house around APIs, Power BI performance, reporting and time recording, which we need to move forward on. We've got the iDocs Cloud National User Group. We did a land demonstrator with Alan Turing Institute and the National Geospatial Commission, and we're keen to take that forward. We work closely with Urban Intelligence, Virtual Newcastle, done quite a bit of work around National Underground registers, and we're dead pleased with how we're working with EasyTrieve and using their system. It doesn't stop there though. In terms of ODP, we're keen to, launch further Planex services. So we've got a bit of a roadmap here, short term around find out if you need planning permission, similar to other LPAs. Dead interest in terms of pre-application, other application types from Planex stack. And we're dead interested in terms of the end-to-end product pilots and getting much more involved in those so that we can provide comparison data in terms of back office planning systems, compare to iDocs Cloud Tascomi, build that overall evidence base, and continue to participate and complete in the metrics and evaluation reporting requirements. So it's exciting times ahead for us. Again, just moving out, we're building out from that M&E work. We're really keen to focus on how we optimize our assets across the sort of corporate planning, policy, digital software space. So lean into products, think about interoperability, the connectivity, and benefiting from the multiplier effect. So this is beyond ODP, beyond prop tech, etc., across the corporate space and other LPA space. We're dead keen around how we can integrate and align ODP products with our existing systems. And obviously we're mentioning there digital site notice, metrics in terms of corporate time recording, enforcement work. How does that spread and influence how the customer journey in terms of regulatory services? We've got an ambition in terms of digital data and the customer. And, it's all part of what our journey is in terms of trying to reach customers in the best way possible. And I guess that is it from me. I think I just wanted to share, I think one of the things is we sort of firmly believe that membership in ODP community strengthens our work, and it strengthens our approach, not just in planning and policy, but it shapes council transformation, just not on a Newcastle level, but on a much more macro level as well. So just want to say that. I'm going to hand it over now I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to hand over to Jess from Planex. So thank you, Jess.
Hi, thanks, Duncan. Do you actually mind to keep sharing? And if I just ask you to go to the next slide?
Of course not.
Sorry, we didn't better prepare that handoff.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great. Good morning, everyone. I am Jess. I work as a developer on Planex through Open Systems Lab. And I'm going to share a bit of an update about planning constraints today. So next slide, please, Duncan. So if you've been to these show and tells before, you may have seen previous demonstrations of planning constraints, which is an area typically in the beginning of a Planex application service where, based on the site address and the site boundary provided by the applicant, Planex, we go away and we query the planningdata.gov UK platform, as well as Ordnance Survey, for various data sets to see what applies to your property. These are things like conservation areas, etc. In the past, this has always just sort of been a list of data sets that we sort of hard-coded and we chose to check because of how they align to sort of the requirements in an application. But we are sort of in this exciting new space of the Planex future where, like we heard from Duncan, councils are developing a lot of services on Planex that are not typical application services. So validation checkers, discretionary services, microservices, things that can be much more specialized. And a common piece of feedback we were starting to hear was, while constraints are really useful to check, if, for instance, I am building a microservice about dropped curbs and my eligibility to perhaps change something around that, I don't want to have to show the user this list of 20 plus things because it's quite dense information on that page. We're telling you about all sorts of things. Are you in a site of scientific interest, etc. Whereas if you're doing a dropped curb project, perhaps all you want to check is something like classified roads. So this is sort of a new feature available to Planex editors that allows you to select exactly which constraints you want to check per service that you develop. We still have sort of the curated list here of all constraints, which continues to be sort of our best recommendation of these are most useful for your statutory application types, but it gives you a lot of flexibility now for discretionary services that you're developing. Next slide, please. Great. And planning constraints are still sort of presented to applicants the same way as we're used to, but this list will now only show what you chose to check as an editor. And just as a sort of reminder, the real benefits of checking planning constraints automatically in Plan X is that it means we're able to show applicants only the questions that are most relevant to them and sort of automatically suggest information, which leads to them having to answer fewer questions manually throughout the process. You no longer need to go away and personally research whether or not you're in a conservation area, which may lead you to lots of various different sites or PDFs, et cetera, to find that information. We can help you understand that automatically. The same as now, users always still have an option to report inaccuracies based on our automatic checks. If we think you're in the central activity zone, but you know that you're not, you have an option to sort of say, no, this is inaccurate. I want to proceed as if I'm not. And if your service asks a constraint-based question that you as an editor are now choosing not to automatically check, then users will still sort of just be able to see it themselves and answer it manually. So that's what I have today, an update to constraints. Stay tuned for this coming soon, and hopefully you'll see it in sort of some of the discretionary services that you're using on Plan X. And I'll pass over to Joe at Open Systems Lab now.
Well, thanks, Jess. If you have to keep sharing, Duncan, I'll share for a demo in a couple of slides' time. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Joe, another developer on Plan X. Some of you might have already seen this because I demoed this in the internal show and tell, but worth doing again in a public one. So this was previously a request from the Metrics and Evaluation Working Group in preparation for the pilot. So previously, to collect user feedback, there was a long kind of Google-based survey which opens in a separate tab, and the results are all collated on Google rather than in Editor. So I worked on this feature to add a feedback component to the editor itself. Next slide, please, Duncan. So that users could share feedback about their journey in a simple way that they're used to doing in a flow. And next slide, please, Duncan. And so that service owners can gather data and figure out where we can make improvements. If you look again, Duncan, I think I've gone overboard with the graphics here. Yeah, to improve the service. So next slide, I think, is that demo now? No, okay, so yeah, the solution was adding the new feedback component. So this is editable in terms of making the questions mandatory or not. So editors have access to a toggle to be able to make it so users can skip past if they like, or that they have to fill it in. The fields are all customizable, so the title and the text you can see there on that example, they're all editable. The only things that are kept the same are the 5 faces question and the free text question, but you can change the title for both of those. So I think now I'm just going to quickly show you it in action, if you let me share, Duncan. Thank you. Whole window. Here we go. So is that showing for everyone? Can someone give me a thumbs up?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, cool. Nice. So this is just a quick flow space I made earlier. I'm going to add the new component called feedback. And as you can see here, all these fields are editable. So I'm going to just make this a bit more emphatic and say something like this so you can see the changes. Note that we've got this privacy policy link, which currently just goes to nothing. So if I was doing this in a real flow, I'd make sure to change that, not to Google, obviously. And I'm going to make it so that feedback isn't required. And then I create that. I'm going to publish my flow. I've already made it live, so hopefully on this link, this should now work. So I'm a user now. I'm going to say I'm having a great time with Plan X. I love it. That submits that. And then on the editor side, this should show up in the submissions log. Oh, no, sorry, the feedback log. There we go. And So this should be a neat way for people to be able to collate all the feedback all at once. And that's it. Worth saying that all councils that are part of the pilot now have this feedback component added to their live services, so this should already be in use. Right, if anyone's got any questions, please put them in the chat. Otherwise, I think I'm handing over to Freya.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to be talking about the updates we've done to the review process on Bobs today. So I'll just start sharing my screen. Yep, so I'll be going through a demo of the review and sign-off process we've updated, and then we've got Ed on the call as well, who will be going over the appeals work that we've done recently. So in terms of what we have done to update the review process, so for anyone that isn't sure about this is the stage when a manager or someone who is authorised to issue a decision on a case checks the application and a recommendation made by the case officer. So previously, the review process that we designed looked a lot like the assessment process with very similar task lists. So the reviewer was shown a list of all the tasks that were completed by the case officer, and they would open up each of those tasks into a new page, check the information, and then confirm if they agreed or wanted to make any changes to that. So it did meet needs. However, when we started talking to managers and reviewers and did some testing, the feedback we got was that managers actually work in a different way to case officers. So they work in a very non-linear way. And they don't follow a step-by-step process like case officers do. And they prefer to see all the information in a more holistic way, so they can skim through the application details and pick up exactly what they want to check in the order that they like to check things, because everyone works in a different way at different councils. So what was important to them was being able to access the relevant information throughout the journey and to easily make comments and to talk with the case officer within Bobs so that they could correct or change any parts of the assessment. So based on that feedback, we realised that our initial approach and design wasn't actually ideal for managers. So we've now updated that. So this is Bobs that I'm showing you now in our staging environment. And this is a household application for a single-storey rear extension. So just to really quickly show you what the assessment process looks like for anyone that hasn't seen it before. We just log back in. So this is what that assessment process looks like. So it's a simple list of all the tasks, and then for each task, you open it up and you see the information, and you can change it in there. But the feedback we got from managers, let me just go back into that case, was that they wanted to see things differently. And so this is the changes we have made. Okay, so this is what you would see when you come through and to begin your review tasks as a manager. So one of the biggest changes that you can probably see straight away is this new map feature that we've developed. So this is building off the site map that's already come through from Planex into Bobs. And I can zoom in and out and I can see that the constraints have been mapped onto here. So this is a conservation area shown here in green. And I can also zoom in and I can see the neighbours that have been consulted for this householder case, and I can see if they have responded and whether or not they objected, on what grounds they objected, or if they didn't respond. And then coming through to here at a glance, again, I can see the information. It's really important to managers to be able to get to grips with cases, because obviously they've got a lot of cases coming through to them for sign off at any time. So the application details, including the key dates, any constraints that are at that site are listed here, including the source. And then again, they can see that on the map here as well. They can check which neighbours were consulted, so which addresses we sent letters to, and they can see if any responses came through. They can see which internal consultees we wrote to and why. So for example, for this case, because it has that constraint, the case officer wrote to the design team. They can look at the site history that was input by the case officer. And then they can at a glance view the document list that supports this application as well. So basically what we've done is pulled a lot of information that was in different places within the assessment task list, and we put it all into one really easy to click through review panel up at the top of the page there. So then coming through onto the task list for the reviewer, again, we've changed the order of how things are presented to them, and we've changed the way the information is shown to them. So now, instead of having to open up each page, it's a much quicker process where they can just come through and we just ask them questions, so they can quickly go through these questions and decide whether or not any changes are required. So for example here, do you accept that notifications have been completed in terms of neighbours? As the manager, I can quickly come up here, I can see who we wrote to, if they responded, and I can confirm if I agree or I don't agree with who is being consulted there. So my Wi-Fi is going slightly slow in the office today. Just let that load. I'll keep on going whilst that's loading. Okay, so that's just coming up because I actually created this case yesterday on staging, but that would usually obviously load as expected. And then you can do the same thing for publicity. So you can check that the site notice was posted with the image and any commentary from the case officer here. Let me see if it will let me do it here. Great. And then I can come down and just work through all the different tasks that managers would usually expect to see. So for example, we've grouped the check on SIL and the check on if it needs to go to planning committee in the same place, because they're normally things that if that does need to happen, that need to get picked up quite early on in the process, whilst there's still a lot of time left to decide the case. Then I can come through and I can see the sort of officer assessment part of it. So again, it just shows for the information that the officer has written, and I can choose to either accept that, I can return it to the officer with comments, or I can edit it myself. For example, let me edit one of these, and then we can show you what it looks like when it goes back to the case officer. Okay, so I think I'm going to pretend that I want to make a change here to the site description. So let's say, for example, they've made a mistake here and they've said that it's a 3-story property, and I've looked at the site and I can see it's a 2-story property. So I'm going to return that to the officer in case that was something that they missed and in case that might impact the assessment that they've done. Then I can check the consultation. I can see if the consultees responded and what they said, and I can confirm if I'm happy with that. And then the same with the neighbour responses. So I can see there's one objection. If I want to, I can open it up and view the entire objection. But in this case, I'm happy just to review what the case was said about that objection, and I'll accept that. And then finally, having gone through all of the assessment, I can check the conditions and the assessment against policies. So for policies, I can come in here and I can see each consideration that the officer has responded to. So for this case, as a householder case, they've looked at impact to amenity and the design of the development, and I can see which policies they've referenced. And again, if I want to make any changes, I can just edit those here. And I think I'll make one more change to this case, just so you can see what it looks like on the case officer side. So let's come down to conditions, review conditions. So they've put in 2 conditions, but I'm going to say you need to include a condition on materials. And then you can see here that status tag here is updated to awaiting changes. So now as the reviewer, we can imagine that I've thoroughly gone through and checked everything, and I've got 2 comments that I want to return to the case officer within Bob's for changes that they need to make. So then I can come through here to the final stage of the review process, which is signing off the recommendation. And it says I have suggested changes to be made to the officer, so I can say let's return that case for assessment. And I'm just going to say to them, see comments. So then once I've done that, you can see that the status here for this case has updated to be reviewed. And then what I'm going to do now is to log out of the management view, and I'm going to sign back in with the case officer view. And then we can look up that case. And here's that case again. And now I'm logged in as a case officer. I can see that the status here is to be reviewed. So I know that my manager has returned that to me with comments that I need to action. So this is that same case. I'm going to go back into the assessment part of the process, and then it really clearly highlights where the manager has suggested changes. So as a case officer, I know exactly what I need to open up and check. So for example, going into the site description, I can see the reviewer has made a comment about it being a 2-story home. And I'm just going to update my own assessment to reflect that change. And that now shows it's completed. And I can do the same for that condition change that they requested. So I can come in here and it says you need to include that condition. And I can simply add that condition. Okay, let's save that. So having made the updates that my manager requested, I can go through and I can update my draft recommendation. And here it keeps an audit log of actions that have been taken. So I can see I initially submitted this to my manager yesterday, and that today it was returned to me and I was asked to look at the comments. But I'm happy to now go ahead and update my assessment and to submit that back to my manager. So let's do that. Now I'm going to log back in as the manager, and then we'll just finish off that review process. Okay, so again, the status has updated here to awaiting determination. And I can come back in, I can see, yes, there's been updates to the review tasks. And then again, I can see exactly where the officer has made changes. And I can come in and I can see, yes, they've updated that to 2 stories. And then if I want to follow the audit log of why those changes are made or what changes are made, then we have that within here too. So you can see the dates that things are changed and the changes that were made and who requested that change as well. And the same with the condition. So I can see that's been updated and they've added in that condition that I wanted. So I'm going to accept both of those changes. All the other review tasks have already been completed from my first attempt at review. So then, having checked everything and got the updates completed by the case officer, I can go ahead and I can submit the decision. So I'm given one more chance to go through and check everything. I can see all the changes that were made in the audit, and then I can click, yes, let's publish that decision. And that will now show that it's been decided. So that was the updated review process. And then just a few final comments on that. So all of this work is really new. So we're aware that there's a few further improvements we can make to the navigation. So for example, you might have noticed there when I was clicking out, I was being pulled back up to the top of the page. So something we're going to do is make sure that users are pulled down to the correct part of the page as they work through the task to save them some time. We're going to be doing an end-to-end review testing as product owners to pick up any minor changes or bugs. And then this will also be tested as part of the end-to-end pilot by the councils that are doing that pilot process. And then also, we've learned some lessons from doing this process. We've learned about a different approach to sharing information to users, and we'll be thinking about how we can apply those lessons to other development areas, such as pre-abs, which we've started work on. So thank you. I'm going to pass on to Ed.
Thank you for that very comprehensive demonstration. I feel it's going to be a bit of an anticlimax for me now. Running through the next bit, but I won't stand on ceremony. I'm going to jump straight in to a demo. So anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Ed. I work for Buckinghamshire Council and a product owner on the BOPS product. So one of the features that we identify we need for end-to-end testing on live applications is the ability to deal with planning application appeals. So this is when an applicant takes their decision to the planning inspectorate, who will then make a decision on our behalf. It could be for a number of different reasons. I will point out at this stage that the feature we've developed is for recording appeals and not for handling that casework. So it's a very minimum approach to this, and it is designed to record the appeals, not actually handle that casework and be a workflow tool for that. So without delay, we'll look at a demo. So these are our decided cases, and this one we refused. The applicant wasn't particularly happy with our decision of refusing it, so they've gone for an appeal. So when we received the appeal, it worked in 4 stages. The first one is that the inspector will notify us that they've received an appeal. So from the bot side, we go into the application and we've got a little button here that says mark for appeal. It's all very much does what it says on the tin, this process. So the first step of this is that the appeal's been lodged, and we can record that with the date it was received. We also get the option to upload files, so any files that have been sent through with that we can add, and when these go in, they automatically get tagged in the document management area as an appeal document, and then we can enter a reason for the appeal. So in this case, it will be I've refused application. And it's simple as that, but that's the free text, so you can enter any reason you want, and then we save that. And you'll notice when it's saved, we now have an additional status. So we retain the original refuse status from our decision, and then we get a new status, which is appeal lodged. So that enables us to identify that that application has been received the appeal, and it's in our system now. The next step in the process is we get told from the inspectorate that the appeal is valid. So again, we're able to mark that and add any documents that we've received in relation to it becoming valid into that application. That will then show, and when that's added and you go into the appeal, you can see that the documents are all beginning to build within that appeal as well. And we get a little history log of events that have happened. So again, the next step is that the appeal has started, and you'll notice that every time I go in to update the appeal, it doesn't ask us to choose which step we're on. It knows that it's been made valid. So the next logical step is that we're going to start the appeal, and we can update that. And then the final step that we've got is the decision. So you'll see that we get 4 choices here. We get withdrawn, allowed, dismissed, or split decision. Obviously, we're very comprehensive and good, so this appeal is dismissed. We can add the documents, the decision notice in there. And save that. And then we get the appeal decision showing that it's been dismissed. So it keeps a nice record of all of those things, all of the documents that have been added, and all of the stages that appeal has been through. The next steps for this is we're looking at the API and how that then communicates to the DPR for the register. So we can identify that and display on the API that an appeal has been received, and then that will allow for the updates to people who either registered a comment or are tracking that. So it will sort of close that final loop as well, that we'll be able to notify residents when we've received those appeals. That's it from the appeal recording. I think, is it back to you, Duncan?
Cheers, Ed. Thanks for that. Thanks very much to Jess, Joe, Freya, and yourself, Ed. I think there was. Are there any questions before we move towards closure? I think I saw one about, is iDocs Uniform part of the iDocs Cloud community? In terms of what I was referencing, we have an LPA user group, which is formed of iDocs Tascoma users only. So it's only iDocs Tascoma users who are in that group. Be dead happy to talk to you about that group and its work, though. If you wanted to reach out to me or other members of that, just give us a shout. Any other questions? Any other comments?
It's a question in the chat, Duncan.
Okay. Do you want to read that? Do you want to read that one out?
I don't mind reading it. So it says, with regards to conditions, is there an option to select from a standard conditions list, or do they need to be manually entered?
Yeah, so we've got a few standard conditions built in. So ones like the time limit and materials to match that every council uses. And then councils will be able to add their own condition list and select from that. But we either haven't built that yet, we haven't tested it yet, but that is something that will be a feature on Bob's.
Excellent. Hope that
Okay.
answers the question.
Were there any others? I just want to say, thanks very much for the presentations today and the demos. I think it really does exemplify the work of developers in partnership with the councils today. So, that strong focus on feedback loops, continuous improvement. So not just the gathering feedback that we saw from Joe, but the actual acting upon that from Freya, Ed, and Jess as well. So I think that was really, really good and interesting. So thanks very much for that. I'm going to close the meeting, and just to say that if you're having a break over Christmas, have a really nice time. We look forward to seeing you in January at the next show and tell. And best wishes for everybody on this call for 2025. Thank you very much.